Hello and welcome to Soccer 101. My name is Daryl Grove, and sitting across the table from me, it's a man who wants to know how many countries are in this country. His name is Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Hello, I do, and I'm in good company with Ted Lasso on that one, and I look forward to finding out that answer.
So we are here to talk about the home nations, England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, better known as the United Kingdom. That's the name of the country. A lot of people feel that's the country that should be competing in world soccer. Why do England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland get their own FA when they're not independent countries?
Right. We get that question fairly frequently, usually around either the European Championships or the World Cup, as to why are there suddenly two of those teams in there. Usually with the Euros, I think it was, three last time around?
Oh, yeah.
Northern Ireland, Wales, and England all in there.
Yeah.
So, first of all, I think from a modern perspective, the answer is, do you really want all those combined? Because I'm not sure how much of a difference that's going to make. But from a historical perspective, there's probably a lot more to it.
There is. Okay, so I did some research, and the answer is that these nations basically invented soccer, and them playing internationals against each other predates the formation of FIFA, predates everybody else playing international games.
And for you pedantic folks out there who are saying, well, they invented football, soccer comes from association football, so they invented that too.
Oh, yeah. Go back and listen to some early episodes of the Soccer versus Football episode of Soccer 101, and you'll get a longer discussion of that.
Yeah.
I'm going to take you all the way back to 1872, Taylor, the first international match, the first proper international football match between England and Scotland. Takes place in Glasgow, 4,000 people in attendance. Can you guess what the thrilling scoreline was?
1-0.
No.
Ah, of course.
No.
How many mustaches there? I'm going to assume 22 mustaches on the field.
All the mustaches,
All right.
22 on the field and 4,000 in the stands.
And did all of the team photos, or did the players in all the team photos look like grumpy train conductors? Because that's what I picture all of those team photos. They all have this weird scowl and their arms are crossed.
It's a lot of arms
What are you taking my photo while I'm playing soccer?
It's a lot of arms folded in it. Can you guess how much the entry fee was?
Oh, I see. This is where I go either way too much or way too low. I'm going to go £5.
1 shilling.
Ah, okay.
1 shilling. £5, I think, would have been very expensive in 1872.
What's a shilling?
It's about 5 pence.
Okay.
I think.
What's pence?
So
that cents?
They decimalised the English currency. I don't know when. I think in the 70s.
Yeah.
So it completely confuses me. Shillings and all that stuff predates me.
It is a thing that I wish I didn't have to do, but it is my great shame that usually when I go to countries that use coins as legitimate currency, I'm just sort of like, take them. Shit, I don't know how much things are. I don't know what's worth what. And you all in Germany both have small coins are worth $40 and a large coin is worth 1 cent. And it's always this is this the one that's worth money? And it never is. It never is.
You should really figure out the euro.
It's too much.
It's here to stay.
1 and 2, the numbers are confusing.
It's here to stay. So yeah, that was the first
Weird
international.
hearing that from an Englishman, but okay.
I know, right? I'm going against the current. The first international match officially was 1872. There were games prior to that, but they all took place in London, 1870 to 1872. There were 5 games, but they were all an English team versus some London-based Scotsmen. So it's not considered a proper international match because you're only picking Scotsmen who lived in the city of London.
That should have been a Premier League team, the London Scotsmen. I
London
wish that
Scotsmen.
existed.
So from then on, it expands out, right? And so England and Scotland keep playing each other once a year. Wales get involved in 1876. Ireland get involved in 1882.
And it was smooth sailing from there.
It kind of was, because suddenly you get a home nations championship where all these teams are playing each other on a sort of ad hoc international schedule. But then FIFA is formed because other countries have started playing football. So FIFA is formed in 1904, which is, how many years is that? So that's 32 years after England and Scotland first played each other.
Right.
So when FIFA are forming the game around the world, they can't just suddenly say, you 4 countries which started this whole thing off, you can't play each other anymore. It would be like getting rid of your biggest franchises if you were a single entity type thing, right?
and with that in mind, it would also be trying to tell your largest franchises what to do when they were well, we could just leave and not be a part of this, and we'll see which one of us is around longer right now at least. And I think that's probably why FIFA had to have some concessions to make sure that the powers of the sport at the time, maybe not always, but at the time, were involved and okay with everything that was happening.
Yep, and so England, Scotland, Wales, Wales and Ireland, and then later Northern Ireland, get a sort of special dispensation to be an individual soccer nation, even if not an individual actual nation.
All right. So they have their own, and then how does that work with when Ireland splits? Is it because Ireland are their own nation? Does it just not really apply? They just start their own federation?
Yeah, Northern Ireland kind of takes their place in terms of the British Home Nations Championship, which is a whole other thing that gets going.
All right. Should we talk about that now?
And it's Northern Ireland that's on the IFAB board. I want to talk about the IFAB
let's talk about that. Yeah.
Okay, so when FIFA's formed in 1904, they agree to abide by the rules of what's known as IFAB, the International Football Association's board, which is essentially... it's when England, Scotland, Wales, and at the time Ireland meet up to decide what the rules are going to be. Because it used to be like when we play in England, we play by the English set of rules, in Scotland, the Scottish set of rules. And I can't remember if it was Wales or Ireland had the idea, why don't you guys just have a meeting and like figure out the rules between you? So but then when they have the IFAB board meetings, they start to really hammer out the proper rules of soccer that we can all agree on. IFAB exists to this very day. It's IFAB that sort of decides major law changes in the game of soccer. So when FIFA is formed in 1904, they agree to abide by... it really gives IFAB this legitimacy when it used to be just like settling arguments. Yeah. Now it becomes this board that is responsible for the laws of the game.
And I understand why it's called what it's called, especially given when it came into existence and predating FIFA. But it's just more hilarious and totally perfectly English to me that the International Football Association's boards or whatever is England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. It's just like, well, that's the world according to England in the 1870s.
I mean, have you met English people from the 1870s? That really is how they thought.
I haven't, but if Bill and Ted technology ever happens, that's going to happen.
So here's the big thing is sometime in the 1910s, I want to say 1912 or 13, FIFA successfully lobbies for them to be a part of IFAB. They're kind of like, we're kind of running the whole world here. You guys are originally important, but we should be involved in making the laws of the game. And they came up with, between them, what I think is a really, really clever system. Do you know about how IFAB is set up?
I thought it was just that they had to agree, FIFA, to drive Range Rovers and smoke pipes, and then they were allowed into IFAB. Is that not how it works?
That was part of it.
Okay.
But the main part is each of the home nations, England, Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, gets one vote. FIFA gets 4 votes. Like, it just has one block of 4 votes. So that neither of them can make a rule change without each other, because you need 6 votes out of 8 to approve a change to the laws of the game. So nothing can change without FIFA's approval, but also nothing can change without at least 50% of the home nation's approval. It's kind of an ingenious system.
Question about IFAB.
It's what they should have come up with at the end of Game of Thrones.
That would have been perfect, and I would have hated that less. With IFAB, like, because of it being such a historically long-standing traditional organization, does it sort of like what the U.S. Senate is supposed to be, of being the longer, more deliberative, thinking things out, making long-term plans body, theoretically, is what it's supposed to be. Is that sort of IFAB? Is it not as big of a deal as far as you understand?
What would be Congress? There's no Congress then.
What do you mean?
What would be the equivalent?
Well, the House of Representatives is supposed to be more every 2 years. It changes with the whims of the masses, whereas Senate is all I mean to say is IFAB slower to implement sweeping changes rather than what we've got all the power, let's just make a bunch of rules, or is it because it's this long tradition-oriented group or organization, is it much more well, these are the rules of the game and we're hesitant to change them?
I mean, I think you can see there's been just slow, steady tweaks. Yeah. Right? There were big changes in 2018 when they brought in you can pass it backwards from kickoff, and 2019 when you can pass it from the 6-yard box to a player within your own area. So they're definitely willing to make changes. But I think it is more like what you said, right? They're not going to make major sweeping changes, especially with that voting system. They're not suddenly going to be all right, everybody has to use their left foot now.
Yeah, which is I do kind of wish they would do that. I realize that I have run the English jokes kind of into the ground here, but I do love that, in terms of the British stereotypes of being very deliberative and very, we must think about the way things operate. Just the idea of grown men all very blah, 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 debating about should we allow back passes from kickoff. I just love that for some reason. I find that outstanding. I'm assuming there are monocles and wigs and robes, and they eventually come to terms with it and then have to get FIFA on board as well.
That's kind of still how soccer is.
I dig it.
All right, what I think people might not know about is the Home Nations Championship. Had you ever heard of this before?
I believe from you talking about the Home Nations Championship, but that's about it.
Okay, so from those first games in 1872, and then, like I said, it involves Wales from 76 and Ireland from 82. Eventually, people started keeping track of the scores amongst the 4 home nations, and it gets kind of formalized into a single standing table, right? So it became this annual competition from 1884 to 1984, so 100 years.
Wow.
With some years off for the wars and things like that. But for 100 years, it was each team played the other team just once. So you play 3 games, and it's 2 points for a win, 1 point for a draw, and then a winner is crowned at the end of the season. That was the sort of round robin British Home Nations International Championship that happened for 100 years.
And I'm assuming that England dominated that over the course of the 100 years.
Over the course of the 100 years, yeah. And eventually, England was the nation that in 1984 kind of said, we're not going to do it next year because we want to use these international dates to play tougher competition. This is in 1984. Scotland then said, yeah, we want to do the same. We want to play tougher competition. And ironically, Northern Ireland won the British Home Championship that year.
Hey!
And still possess the trophy.
Northern Ireland with the trophy. I like it. So I think we still should talk about maybe some attempts to potentially revive that championship, as well as the possibility of those 4 nations competing as one somewhere along the line. Since they've done it once, maybe they'll do it a bunch more times. But before we talk about that, we should talk about today's sponsor, ExpressVPN.
If you would like to live in America and watch some action from any of the home nations, you could use ExpressVPN to spoof your IP and tell the internet, hey, I'm in the United Kingdom.
I'm assuming that is
It won't let you say I'm in England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. You have to say I'm in the United Kingdom.
You have to choose which one. And I'm assuming that's the only way you would ever be able to watch domestic Northern Irish football. I'm going to guess you have to have some sort of Northern Ireland access.
They don't have any TV rights deals in the United States.
No, probably not. So you could use ExpressVPN. It basically allows you to operate as though you have an IP address in that country, so then you can
watch the Welsh FA Cup.
Or if you're in England, you could watch BBC and thus watch the match of the day, watch Match of the Day or Match of the Day 2, depending on whichever one you want. But then you could use it for, we've talked about it previously, you could use it for getting Netflix around the world. You can use it to get paid subscriction services. So maybe there's a streaming site that isn't available in your country but is available somewhere else.
Like 11 Sports in Taiwan for just a couple dollars a month. Yeah,
that is not that much. Yeah. That works.
Hint, hint, that could work.
It could indeed. So if you would like to protect your online activity today, which they do.
It does that too.
And find out how you can get 3 months free at expressvpn.com/soccer.
I was just thinking it was because you were embarrassed because you were watching the Welsh FA Cup or the Northern Irish League.
You just want to cover it?
You didn't want people to find out. So you protect your online data so no one ever knows.
Daryl, what do you watch? It's porn. It's porn. It's not Northern Ireland, I swear. You can go to expressvpn.com/soccer. That's expressvpn.com/soccer for 3 months free with a 1-year package.
One more time, it's expressvpn.com/soccer to learn more.
All right, so we said it stopped in 1984.
The Home Nations Championship,
Northern Ireland are forever the champions.
They are.
So that's where we are right now.
They literally have the trophy.
But am I correct in saying that when England failed to qualify for, was it Euro 2008 that you all did not go to?
That is true.
I remember there being some rumblings, probably not legitimate, maybe it was just tabloid rumors, that there was a chance that since all 4 home nations did not qualify for Euro 2008, that maybe it would be revived. Do you remember these rumors?
I do remember those rumors. So they did try to get this going again in 2011. England were the ones that were like, we don't really want to do it.
I would have bet all my money on that.
Yeah, so they went ahead with Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and Ireland, and then Ireland hosted it in Dublin over 2 periods. I think it was February and then May of 2011. It was called the Nations Cup. It was sponsored by Carling, so it was called the Carling Nations Cup.
And FIFA saw this, or UEFA saw this, and they were like, you know what? We want to turn that into a whole league. And thus the Nations League was born?
I doubt it was the inspiration because it did not go well. So for several reasons, attendances were very low. So all of the games were hosted at the Aviva Stadium, which is Ireland's beautiful new stadium that holds 51,000.
Oh boy.
Attendances were nowhere near 51,000. I think the biggest game got 19 or 20,000. There was a Wales versus Northern Ireland
I really thought you were
going
to say 19 or 20 people.
Well, the Wales versus Northern Ireland game got 529 people.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's a lot to blame. First of all, apparently The Football Association of Ireland set ticket prices very high.
Higher than 1 pence?
I think they overestimated demand.
£5 then.
Second of all, we're not that far out of the recession, right? In 2011,
true.
people did not have money to throw around. Third, there was an Icelandic volcano erupted.
Oh, that was then.
Yeah, it was the ash cloud. So it was pretty tough to get, because a lot of people get cheap flights from the UK to Ireland.
That's right.
That was not as easy to do, but I'm not sure that many people would have gone anyway, as I understand it.
Plus, then you would have had to fly Ryanair, right?
You might have,
and nobody wants that, from what I understand.
I mean, I used to enjoy some very cheap flights on Ryanair.
It's like £19. Is that? I think I've seen that price.
Yeah,
somewhere.
I used to fly back and forth from Dublin to Birmingham for literally £10. Yeah. But anyway, man. I think one thing that it proved as well is that a lot of the home nation stuff is about wanting to beat England.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. It's about there's not really a rivalry in terms of we want to get you between Scotland and Wales.
Like, you guys were oppressed too? Yeah, us too. All right. Well, I guess we're playing against each other now.
But that's it, right? Mm-hmm. I think the history is that England is, like, I'm ashamed of it, but England is the oppressor. Mm-hmm. England invaded those nations, and so there's a lot of...
I've seen a history book.
So there's a strong will for, like, independence, or at least, like, just thumbing your nose at the English that you can achieve through soccer, right? So that's why games against England are often really high profile.
That's so gauche. Like, I don't understand. Like, what do they need? Like a national holiday celebrating their independence from Britain? Like, you don't have to just talk so much about that type of thing.
Well, I mean, they would need independence from Britain.
Oh yeah, good call.
That's a big
Maybe that's part of it. Right? There you go.
That is
a
big part of it.
But there have been attempts then to play as a unified country, correct?
There have been attempts by England to play as a unified country. Yeah. So back in the day, there was a Great Britain national team that did compete in the early Olympics, right? So London 1908, I think, was the last time Britain had the Olympics. There was a British team competed in it, but it was mostly English amateurs, right? So Great Britain stopped sending a team to the Olympics when it became more professional, and there was this weird thing where they just didn't want to send a professional team. And then when it came back around to, like, it eventually switched to being like a U23 tournament. So when Britain had the opportunity to put a team back in the Olympics, there was just no agreement between England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland to want to do that. And I think that's the really important part of this, is the reason that there's very, very little chance of a United Kingdom or a Great Britain permanent soccer team is that, quite rightly, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland want their own independent soccer teams because that's what they've always had.
Yeah. I mean, it does. It's a strange thing where on the surface, on the very, very, very surface, if you're like, yeah, they're all like, United Kingdom, get them all together, we'll play like one competition, it'll be cool. But then as soon as you go a millimeter down into the depth of that entire quagmire, you realize, like, are there quotas? Like, does each team get guaranteed a certain number of players? Do you only give one? Do you not give any guarantees? In which case, those federations now look incredibly weak. On top of that, do you have the risk of, like, the slippery slope argument of, like, well, if we commit to this competition, how many more? And then eventually, do we have our own federations?
That's the main argument, especially that Scotland are the most vocal about making this argument, that as soon as you allow for one British team, then it's like a little crack in the dam that is holding back the flood that could wash away all those independent associations. Yeah. And then the rest of the world and FIFA might say, hey, I think you should just have a Team GB, or I think you should just have a United Kingdom team. And in some ways...
To be fair, I'm just going to interject real fast to say, like, 1307, they were like, King Edward, come on in just this one time, help us with this one, like, dispute, and then all of a sudden, they're England's forever. So, like, I get the hesitation on, like, just come on in once.
So it is based on history, right? Yeah. But I mean, I could make a logical argument that you could just let a Team GB happen for the Olympics.
Right.
And FIFA have said we won't, like, take this as a sign that it's the end of the Scottish Football Association or the Welsh Football Association. But that promise does not seem to be enough to mollify Scottish concerns, right? In some ways, that's not logical because it seems like the guarantee from FIFA is there. But in other ways, I think if you value it so highly, you don't want any cracks. You don't want to even put a toe on the top of the slippery slope, right? I can absolutely understand that point of view, even though I think it would be okay if they let a Team GB happen.
I think this is 100% from a completely, like, ignorant outsider's perspective, but I also have to
I've got an ignorant insider's perspective.
All right, I look forward to that. But I feel like if you are one of those nations who is worried about that, part of that is probably born of the recognition that your national team, if they're playing England, is probably going to lose. Like, you have the inferior talent pool like for a variety of reasons. But I do just wonder if you had those four nations like at a time, or those four countries at a time when they are like at the peak of soccer, if they're all very, very good.
Yeah.
Is it more of a like we could put together a dream team and it would be 3 and 2 and 2 and 3 and we'd have tons like.
I mean, it made a lot of sense. Like I remember when I was sort of less aware of how Scottish and Welsh and Northern Irish people felt. There was definitely a long period of there's the England national team. They've got a lot of really good players, but we don't have a left winger. We're just trying everybody at left midfield. Paul Scholes, Owen Hargreaves, just throwing everybody out there. Steven Gerrard, literally just trying to see who could do a job at left midfield. And at the same time, Wales had Ryan Giggs at the peak of his powers and nobody good around him. Like it just made sense, right? In a Pangea kind of way of like it all would fit back together perfectly.
Yeah, I remember those days of like Wales should be better. They've got Ryan Giggs, they've got Craig Bellamy. That's about it. Like yes, I remember those days quite well.
So yeah, for obvious reasons, then there isn't a unified Team GB except for the 2012 London Olympics. This was a big deal in England and in the United Kingdom. So a big pitch was made that hey, just for this one-off event, we should definitely do it. The Scottish FA refused to even attend a meeting to discuss it.
Yep.
Which I kind of just respect the not even one toe even looking at the slippery slope, not even attending a meeting. Right? Then Wales entered negotiations and then eventually withdrew. Northern Ireland just said, no thanks. Also, we're very aware that we don't have any players that would make this roster. Eventually, Scotland still said no. Wales, I think, just said...
You could have Ryan Giggs.
Well, they said, we're not endorsing it and we're not getting on board with it, but we're also not going to punish any of our players if they do happen to get involved, right? So I don't know if people remember this, but 2012, Stuart Pearce was the Team GB manager. And the squad he was allowed to pick from...
Is his name Psycho?
Yes.
Okay.
The squad he was allowed to pick from for the Great British team for the 2012 Olympics, no players that went to Euro 2012. So that's the majority of the senior England team. And whatever Welsh players would say yes, right? So we did end up with a team with the overage players were Craig Bellamy, Ryan Giggs, who was really coming towards the end at that point. And I think the other overage player was Micah Richards, who weirdly was 24 and he was the over 23 player.
All right.
And then Aaron Ramsey was the only other Welsh player that was on the team. Looking back, it's not a bad team. But you could say there's definitely too many English people on it because they won their group and then went out on penalty kicks in the quarterfinals.
They are English after all. Even if you have some Welsh players in there, the Englishness will dominate.
Yep. Sturridge missed the important penalty kick.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
How frustrated... There must have been some Welsh fans out there who just saw that and were like, really, Ryan? You're going to play for that team? You're not going to play for Wales for like 15 years.
Yep.
But that team you're good for.
It was his only tournament that he played in, right?
Because
Wales never made a tournament while he was there. So from what I understand now, in the future, to enter a Team GB, it's always the English FA who are most keen on it for obvious reasons. They think they could like pick off a couple of players from other associations, put together a competitive team and have an Olympics. They would need the approval of the other home nations for that to happen. And unless something drastically changes, they're not going to get it.
Right.
That's men's football. For women's football, it is slightly different, right? So they entered a women's team for the 2012 Olympics. Most of these soccer 101s are timeless, right? But I think we have to like have this moment in time. What are we? November 2019?
Yes.
England qualified Team GB for a place at the 2020 Olympics by finishing as one of the highest European places at the 2019 World Cup. They are currently in negotiations with the Scottish FA, Welsh FA, Northern Irish FA to try and put together a Great British team managed by Phil Neville to go to the 2020 Olympics.
I always forget how brutal Olympic qualifying is for European countries because you only have, 4 who qualify, and it is like the top spots, isn't it?
I can't remember exactly what it is, but England had to make the World Cup semi-finals to qualify for the Olympics.
So is it England, Sweden, like the Netherlands, and somebody else? Maybe France? I forget who else
should
is
have done
in
our
there.
research, shouldn't we?
But I guess I forget that because when you said there's more of a chance, I was genuinely surprised by that because with women's football, there are like the Olympics tends to be a way bigger competition than the men's side of the game.
And I think that's why there's a bit more willingness to do it, because you just don't get many opportunities to play in tournaments.
Yeah, and so for me, I was like, well, no, of course Scotland want to reserve their right to play. Like, they want to compete, and then I was remembering, oh no, wait, they didn't qualify because it's really difficult. So then, if you do want to have any opportunity, if you're any of those Scottish players, especially say Kim Little, then maybe it makes more sense. But for you, it might make sense. For the rest of your country, maybe less so. So we shall see. How do you think it plays out?
I have no idea. And I'm really scared to commit to anything. I would bet it plays out with... So there's only 18 players on an Olympic roster. I would bet it's mostly English players. And then I wouldn't be surprised if the Scottish FA say, just, no, you can't take any of our players. Yeah. Maybe there's a fight with Kim Little and the Scottish FA because she really wants to go and play in the Olympics.
Yeah. It could well be. Yeah. We shall find out. At time of recording, we don't know, and we're afraid to speculate. So
I hope that clears up for people who are confused about why there's the UK, then they get the 4 home nations. I don't see it changing any time in the future, mostly because Scotland's doing a really good job of not ever letting anyone take even a tiptoe towards it possibly happening.
Yeah, this is a weird question to ask. Does the leaving the EU make it even less likely for England, because then it's like your own organization and you're even less affiliated with some of those countries?
Well, it makes it less likely because it makes it more likely that Scotland try for independence from the United Kingdom so they can rejoin the EU.
Thank you for clarifying what I was trying to say.
It's more likely that Scotland actually becomes just a fully independent nation.
All right, and they just high five Ireland.
Yes, it may be. Yeah. All right, we've wandered into politics, which I think we did a really good job of not doing for the majority of the show. I think that's the sign that we should wrap this up.
I want to talk a little bit more about the division between Northern Ireland and Ireland. Real fast. No, I do not. I do not want to do that. Let's move on swiftly.
All right, I was ready. I was ready to answer. Okay, so I've been Daryl Grove.
I've been Taylor Rockwell.
Thank you for listening to Soccer 101.